The December wind cuts through my designer dress like it knows exactly where my skin ends, and the numbness begins, whipping my dark hair across my face as I stand on the ledge of the Castellano Hotel's rooftop, 20 stories above Manhattan, where the city lights blur into constellations of broken dreams and the kind of beauty that only exists when you're about to leave it all behind. My bare feet against the concrete ledge have long since stopped feeling the cold, just like my heart stopped feeling anything the moment I realized that my own father, the man who taught me to ride a bike, who braided my hair before school, who promised to always protect me, had systematically destroyed every single piece of my life with the precision of a surgeon removing a tumor. Except in his eyes, I was the disease that needed to be cut out. The fall wouldn't take long. I've calculated it obsessively for the past 3 hours since I bribed the night security guard with the last of my genuine Cartier jewelry. Maybe 4 seconds of absolute freedom before the impact. 4 seconds where I wouldn't be Isadora Volkov, the accused embezzler. Isadora Volkov, the alleged murderer of Anton Kozlov, whose blood I can still see on my hands even though I've scrubbed them raw. Isadora Volkov, the daughter who was stupid enough to trust that family, meant something more than collateral damage in a world where power and money trump every bond that's supposed to be sacred. 4 seconds of peace sounds like heaven, compared to the 6 months I've spent running, hiding, watching over my shoulder as the Russian bratva slowly tightened their noose around my neck, as every friend I had vanished like smoke, as every door I knocked on closed in my face because my father's lies spread faster than wildfire through gasoline-soaked streets. The irony isn't lost on me that I'm wearing the dress he bought me for my 25th birthday. The last birthday where I still believed in fairy tales and happy endings. This midnight blue silk that cost more than most people make in a month, now torn at the hem from crawling through a basement window to avoid the 2 Bratva soldiers who've been tracking me for the past 72 hours. My mother's engagement ring, the only thing I managed to keep when everything else was seized by the FBI, catches the moonlight on my finger, and I wonder if she's watching from whatever afterlife exists. If she's disappointed that I turned out to be as weak as my father always said I was. Too soft for the world we lived in. Too trusting. Too naive. Too everything that gets you killed in a world where mercy is just another word for weakness. Jump or don't, but if you're going to waste my time, at least tell me why. The voice cuts through the wind, and my spiraling thoughts like a blade through silk, smooth and dangerous and entirely unexpected. And I spin around so fast I nearly lose my balance, my arms windmilling as my feet scramble for purchase on the narrow ledge. My heart suddenly pounding with the primal fear of falling, even though falling was exactly what I came up here to do. The man standing 15 feet away, casually leaning against the rooftop access door, like he has all the time in the world, is the last person I expected to see tonight. The last person anyone expects to see unless they're about to die in a much more violent way than jumping off a building. Dante Moretti looks exactly like his photographs in the classified FBI files I once glimpsed in my father's study, all sharp angles and dark Italian beauty, with black hair that's slightly too long and falls across his forehead in a way that probably makes grown men forget they're supposed to be afraid of him. Right before he puts a bullet between their eyes, dressed in a 3-piece black suit that probably costs more than a luxury car and somehow doesn't have a single wrinkle despite the late hour. And those eyes. God. Those eyes are the color of espresso at midnight, dark and fathomless and currently studying me with an intensity that makes me feel like I'm a puzzle he's trying to solve rather than a desperate woman about to become a statistic. He lights a cigarette with a silver lighter that catches the light from the city below, the flame briefly illuminating the sharp planes of his face, the slight shadow of stubble along his jaw, the small scar above his left eyebrow that somehow makes him more attractive rather than less, and takes a long drag like we're meeting for coffee instead of on a rooftop, where one of us is literally contemplating death. "I asked you a question," he says, smoke curling from his lips with each word, his voice carrying that slight Italian accent that turns every syllable into something that sounds like sin and salvation, wrapped together in vocal cords. And I don't like repeating myself, So why don't you step down from there and tell me what could possibly drive a woman to ruin a perfectly good Valentino dress? How do you know it's Valentino? I hear myself ask, which is possibly the stupidest question in the history of stupid questions. But my brain has apparently decided that fashion discussion is more important than the fact that I'm talking to one of the most dangerous men in North America. A man whose reputation includes words like ruthless and merciless, and the devil of Manhattan. A man who's supposedly responsible for more deaths than the winter flu and runs an empire built on fear and blood and absolute control. I know a lot of things, Mia Perduta, he says, and even though I don't speak Italian, something about the way he says it, my lost one, sends a shiver down my spine that has nothing to do with the temperature and everything to do with the way he's looking at me like he can see straight through all my defenses to the broken, shattered thing underneath. I know you're Isadora Volkov. I know your father is Alexei Volkov, who allegedly died in that convenient car accident 6 months ago. I know you're wanted by both the FBI and the Bratva for crimes you didn't commit. And I know you've been living in that rat-infested studio apartment in Queens under the name Sarah Martinez, surviving on convenience store food and sleeping with a knife under your pillow, which, by the way, wouldn't do you much good against the kind of people who are looking for you. The words hit me like physical blows, each revelation another crack in the already shattered foundation of my reality, because if Dante Moretti knows all of this, if he's been watching me, tracking me, knowing exactly where I've been while I thought I was so clever hiding in plain sight, then I was never safe at all, never had a chance, was just a mouse playing in a maze while the cats watched and waited for the perfect moment to pounce. So you came here to watch the show? I ask, surprised by the steadiness in my voice when everything inside me is screaming, my fingers gripping the edge of the ledge behind me so hard my knuckles are probably white as bone. Want to make sure I actually go through with it so you can report back to whoever's paying you to keep tabs on me? If I wanted you dead, Bella, you would have been dead 3 months ago when you walked past me in Grand Central Station carrying that ridiculous fake Prada bag and wearing sunglasses that did absolutely nothing to hide your face, he says, dropping his cigarette and crushing it under the heel of what are undoubtedly $1,000 Italian leather shoes, taking a step closer with the kind of predatory grace that reminds me he's not just a businessman in an expensive suit. He's something far more dangerous underneath all that civilized veneer. I let you walk away because you looked like you were already dead, like a ghost moving through the world, and killing corpses isn't interesting, but this... He gestures at me, at the ledge, at the entire situation. This is just pathetic. The word stings more than it should. More than anything has stung in months of insults and accusations and hatred. Because there's something about the contempt in his voice that reaches past all my numbness and touches something raw and angry that I thought died along with everything else. You don't know anything about me, I spit out, my voice rising with the first real emotion I've felt in weeks. You don't know what it's like to have everything you love, everything you believe in, torn away by the person who was supposed to love you most. You don't know what it's like to be hunted like an animal. To watch every single person you cared about turn their backs on you because they're too scared or too smart to get caught in the crossfire. You don't know what it's like to be so tired, so exhausted from running and hiding and just trying to survive one more day that death starts looking like the only vacation you'll ever get. You're right. I don't know what it's like to be you, Dante says. And suddenly he's closer. Close enough that I can smell his cologne, something expensive and woodsy with notes of bergamot and danger. Close enough that I have to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. Close enough that I realize he's even more devastating up close than from a distance. All masculine beauty and controlled power, and something in his eyes that looks almost like understanding. But I do know what it's like to be betrayed by blood, to have the person who shared your DNA decide you're worth less than their ambitions, to survive when survival seems worse than surrender. So don't stand there and tell me I don't understand pain, Piccola, because I've made pain my business, my weapon, my entire empire, and the difference between you and me is that I decided to make everyone who hurt me bleed for it instead of bleeding out alone on a rooftop like a coward. I'm not a coward, I whisper, but the words sound hollow even to my own ears. Because aren't I exactly that? choosing the easy way out instead of fighting, giving up instead of getting even, letting my father win because I'm too weak, too broken, too fundamentally damaged to figure out how to be strong. Then prove it, he says, his voice dropping to something low and intimate and challenging, extending his hand toward me like he's asking me to dance rather than step down from potential death. Answer my question, Isadora Volkov. Do you care? Does it matter? Does any of this mean anything? Or are you really ready to let your father's last laugh be watching you destroy yourself because he couldn't be bothered to do it himself? I open my mouth to respond, to tell him to go to hell, to ask him what possible difference my answer could make to a man like him. But before the words can form, the rooftop access door explodes open with a crash of metal and violence. 3 men in dark tactical gear pouring through with weapons raised, and I don't need to see their faces to know they're Bratva, to know they're here for me, to know that my time just ran out in the worst possible way. Dante Moretti, the lead one says in heavily accented English, his gun trained on both of us now. You're harboring fugitive. This not your business? Give us girl and walk away? You live another day. But Dante doesn't move, doesn't even flinch, just positions himself between me and the guns with the kind of casual confidence that suggests he's been in this exact situation 1,000 times before and walked away every single time. And when he speaks, his voice carries enough cold authority to freeze hell itself. Funny, I was just thinking the same thing about you walking away and living another day. But since you've interrupted my conversation and brought guns to my city without permission, I'm afraid that option just expired. He moves like lightning, like violence given human form, his hand pulling a weapon from somewhere inside his jacket and firing 3 shots in rapid succession, each one finding its target with the kind of precision that comes from years of practice, and suddenly the men who were threatening us are falling, their weapons clattering uselessly to the concrete as Dante moves through the chaos like he's dancing to music only he can hear. More footsteps echo from the stairwell, more voices shouting in Russian, and Dante's hand wraps around my wrist with bruising strength, yanking me off the ledge and into his body, as bullets shatter the night where I was standing just seconds before, his other arm coming around me in what might be protection or might be imprisonment. I can't tell the difference anymore. Looks like we both have people trying to kill us tonight, he says against my ear, his voice somehow steady despite the gunfire, despite the violence, despite everything, his breath warm against my frozen skin. The difference is, Mia Perduta, I plan to disappoint them, and whether you like it or not, you're coming with me, because I didn't waste 6 months tracking you just to watch you die on a rooftop like some tragic fucking opera when I have plans for you that are far more interesting. He's moving before I can protest, pulling me toward a service entrance I didn't even know existed, his body a shield between me and the bullets that are tearing through the air where we just stood, and I'm running on pure adrenaline and instinct, my bare feet bleeding on the concrete, my heart pounding so hard I think it might explode, wondering if I'm being rescued or kidnapped, if I've just traded one death for another, if the devil I don't know is better or worse than the devil I do. But as we crash through the door and plunge into the darkness of the service stairwell with the sound of pursuit behind us, and Dante Moretti's iron grip the only thing keeping me upright, I realize with startling clarity that for the first time in 6 months, I want to know what happens next. I want to survive to see tomorrow. I want to live long enough to find out why the most dangerous man in New York just saved my life, and what exactly he meant when he said he has plans for me. Living in Dante Moretti's penthouse is like existing in a beautiful, deadly contradiction, where every surface gleams with the kind of luxury that most people only see in magazines, where original Caravaggio paintings hang beside custom-built panels that slide away to reveal enough weapons to start a small war, where the marble floors are heated to the perfect temperature and probably cost more than my entire childhood home. But there's always the underlying current of violence humming through the air like electricity before a storm, reminding me that this gilded cage is still a cage, and the man who holds the key is far more dangerous than any prison guard could ever be. 3 weeks have passed since that night on the rooftop. 3 weeks of learning to navigate Dante's world with the careful precision of someone walking through a minefield blindfolded. 3 weeks of playing the role of his willing mistress while my heart hammers against my ribs every time he enters a room, every time his dark eyes find mine across the dinner table, every time his hand settles possessively on the small of my back, during one of the endless social events that seem to define his existence as much as the violence does. The penthouse itself spans the entire top floor of a building in Tribeca that Dante owns, along with half the neighborhood, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offer panoramic views of Manhattan spread out below like a kingdom waiting to be conquered. And I've spent countless hours standing at those windows in the early morning when sleep won't come, watching the city wake up and wondering if the girl who wanted to die on that rooftop would recognize the woman I'm becoming in this strange, twisted arrangement. My bedroom, because despite the fiction we're selling to the world, Dante has given me my own space with its own ensuite bathroom done in Italian marble and gold fixtures, is larger than the entire apartment I was hiding in before, decorated in shades of cream and gold that would have seemed impossibly elegant in my old life. But now I understand that even the color scheme is strategic, chosen to make me look like I belong in his world, like I'm a treasure he's acquired, rather than a pawn he's using in whatever long game he's playing against my father and the Bratva. The rules of this arrangement were laid out with crystal clarity that first night, after Dante had gotten us safely to one of his properties and poured me 3 fingers of scotch that probably cost more than a monthly mortgage payment. His voice matter-of-fact as he explained that I would attend events with him, play the part of the infatuated woman who couldn't resist his charms, allow myself to be photographed and seen and talked about in all the right circles where my father's associates would hear about it and wonder what game Dante was playing. You'll wear what I tell you to wear, go where I tell you to go, and act like you're exactly where you want to be, he had said, those dark eyes studying me with an intensity that made me feel naked despite being fully clothed. In return, I'll keep you alive. I'll feed you information about your father's operation, and when the time is right, I'll help you destroy him so completely that even his memory will be a cautionary tale. But you need to trust me, Bella. And trust doesn't come cheap in my world. What he hadn't mentioned, what I'm learning day by day with the kind of slow revelation that changes you from the inside out, is that Dante Moretti is nothing like the monster the files described, nothing like the rumors suggest, nothing like what I expected when I imagined the devil of Manhattan in my head during those long, terrified nights in hiding. Yes, I've watched him conduct business meetings that end with men leaving his study pale and shaking. Yes, I've seen the cold fury in his eyes when one of his subordinates disappoints him. Yes, I know, without question, that he's capable of the kind of violence that would make most people's blood run cold. But there are these other moments, these glimpses of something underneath all that carefully constructed darkness that I'm not supposed to see, that maybe he doesn't even know he's showing me. Like the way he noticed, after the first week, that I was barely eating, that I was pushing food around my plate during the elaborate meals his private chef prepared, that I was losing weight I couldn't afford to lose after months of surviving on whatever cheap calories I could find. And instead of commenting on it or making it into some kind of power play, he started appearing in the kitchen at 2 a.m. when my nightmares drove me from bed, rolling up the sleeves of his dress shirt to cook simple Italian food with his own hands. Pasta carbonara with eggs and pancetta that melted on my tongue. Risotto stirred with the kind of patient attention that seemed impossible for a man who rules an empire on fear. Chicken parmesan that reminded me of dinners with my mother before the world went to hell. He never asked if I was hungry. Never made a production of it. Just cooked and set a plate in front of me and ate his own portion while reading through reports or answering emails on his phone, creating this strange bubble of domesticity in the middle of the night, where we could both pretend we were just 2 people sharing a meal instead of a mafia boss and the broken woman he was using as bait. And then there are the nightmares themselves, the ones that jerk me awake screaming about blood on my hands and my father's cold smile and Anton Kozlov's dead eyes staring at me accusingly. The ones that leave me gasping and shaking and so disoriented I forget where I am, until I remember that I'm safe, or at least safer than I was. protected by a man whose protection might be the most dangerous thing of all. The first time it happened, I had braced myself for irritation or indifference, for Dante to send one of his staff to check on me, or simply ignore the disturbance altogether. But instead he had appeared in my doorway like a dark angel, wearing only pajama pants slung low on his hips, all lean muscle and intimidating masculine beauty, asking in that low voice if I was all right. And when I couldn't answer, couldn't do anything but shake and try to breathe, he had crossed the room and gathered me into his arms without asking permission, holding me against his chest while his hand stroked my hair and his voice murmured something in Italian that I didn't understand, but that somehow made the panic recede enough for me to function again. It's become a pattern now, this terrible intimacy born from my broken sleep and his apparent inability to leave me to suffer alone. And I should hate it. Should hate that he sees me at my most vulnerable. Should hate that I'm coming to depend on his presence in the darkest hours. But instead I find myself waiting for it, anticipating the moment when his warmth will chase away the cold terror, when his steady heartbeat under my ear will remind me that I'm still alive, still here, still capable of feeling something other than fear and despair. He never tries to take it further, never uses these moments to push for more than I'm ready to give, just holds me until the shaking stops and my breathing evens out. And then he stays, stretched out on top of the covers beside me like a guard dog protecting its charge, his presence solid and reassuring in a way that should terrify me, but instead makes me feel safer than I've felt since before my world imploded. Tonight is different, though. Tonight is the charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art that Dante has been preparing me for all week. The event where all of New York's elite will gather to pretend they care about art preservation, while really just seeing and being seen, and more importantly, where several of my father's key associates will be in attendance. The men who helped him destroy my life and who think I'm either dead or too scared to show my face in polite society. The dress Dante had delivered to my room this afternoon is a masterpiece of strategic warfare disguised as haute couture, a crimson silk gown by Valentino, the designer he somehow knew I loved, that fits like it was custom made for my body, with a neckline that's just low enough to be provocative without being vulgar, a slit-up one thigh that suggests everything while revealing nothing, and a back that's completely open, showcasing the long line of my spine in a way that makes me feel both powerful and exposed in equal measure. I'm standing in front of the full-length mirror in my room, trying to recognize the woman staring back at me, when Dante appears in the doorway, looking like every dark fantasy ever committed to film in a Tom Ford tuxedo that probably cost more than a luxury vacation. His hair styled back from his face in a way that emphasizes those sharp cheekbones and that perfectly sculpted jaw. And the way his eyes travel over me from head to toe makes heat pool low in my belly in a way that has nothing to do with the temperature of the room. "You look like revenge wrapped in silk," he says, his voice carrying that rough edge that appears when he's affected by something. And he crosses the room to stand behind me, his hands settling on my bare shoulders, his touch burning against my skin as we both stare at our reflection in the mirror. "Your father's men won't know what hit them, Bella. They'll see you on my arm and realize that everything they thought they knew was wrong, that you're not some cowering victim but a woman who's chosen to align herself with their worst nightmare." "Is that what I am?" I ask, meeting his eyes in the mirror, trying to read the expression on his face that's somehow both possessive and protective. "Your weapon? Your tool for revenge?" The questions come out softer than I intend, less accusatory and more genuinely curious, because after 3 weeks of this strange dance we're doing, I still can't figure out what I am to him, beyond a useful pawn in whatever chess game he's playing with the Russian Bratva and my father's ghost. His hands tighten on my shoulders, his thumbs tracing small circles against my skin that send shivers down my spine despite my attempt to remain unaffected, and his eyes in the mirror are darker than I've ever seen them, intense in a way that makes my breath catch in my throat. "You're whatever you choose to be, Isadora," he says, and the use of my full name instead of one of his Italian endearments makes the words feel heavier, more significant. You're a weapon if you want to be, a survivor if that's all you can manage, a queen if you're brave enough to claim it. But you're not just a tool, Mia Perduta. Because tools don't keep me up at night wondering if they're going to disappear. Tools don't make me cook at 2 a.m. just to watch them eat. Tools don't make me question decisions I've already made because I'm worried about their safety more than my strategy. The confession hangs in the air between us, unexpected and raw, and before I can process it, before I can figure out what it means or how to respond, his phone buzzes with the alert that our car is waiting, and the moment shatters like glass, his hands dropping from my shoulders as his expression shudders back into that carefully controlled mask he wears for the world. "Time to go to war, Bella," he says, offering me his arm with the kind of old-world courtesy that seems at odds with everything else about him. "Remember, you're mine tonight, completely and utterly mine, and everyone needs to believe it, needs to see it, needs to understand that touching you means declaring war on me, and nobody in their right mind wants that." The gala is everything I expected and nothing I was prepared for. A glittering sea of designer gowns and expensive tuxedos, of diamonds that could fund small countries, and smiles that hide more secrets than the art they're pretending to appreciate. And from the moment we arrive, I understand why Dante is so feared. Because he doesn't enter a room so much as he commands it. His mere presence causing ripples of awareness and wariness. People parting like the Red Sea to let us pass, while their eyes follow our every movement, with the kind of fascinated horror usually reserved for watching car accidents in slow motion. His hand is a brand on the small of my back, possessive and protective, guiding me through the crowd while he stops to exchange pleasantries with business associates and social acquaintances, introducing me as simply Isadora, without any last name attached. And the way he says it, the way he looks at me when he says it, makes it clear to everyone watching that I'm not just another pretty accessory, but something far more significant, something that belongs to him in a way that transcends simple companionship. I see my father's associates throughout the night, recognizing their faces from old family gatherings and business dinners. Viktor Romanov, who used to give me expensive gifts on my birthday. Mikhail Petrov, who taught me to play chess when I was 12. Dmitry Volkov, my father's cousin, who promised to look after me if anything ever happened to my parents. And watching them see me. Watching their expressions shift from shock to calculation to fear as they realize whose arm I'm on, whose protection I'm under, whose bed they think I'm warming, gives me a savage satisfaction that I didn't know I was capable of feeling. They can't approach me directly. Not with Dante's hand possessive on my body. Not with his dark eyes watching their every move like a predator deciding which prey to take down first. So they watch from a distance and whisper to each other, and probably frantically text my father wherever he's hiding. And I revel in their discomfort, in their confusion, in the fact that for once I'm the one holding cards they can't see. But it's during a trip to the ladies' room, when I foolishly think I can have 5 minutes of peace to collect myself and process the overwhelming sensory assault of the evening, that everything shifts from performance to genuine danger. Because Viktor Romanov is waiting in the hallway when I emerge, his bulky frame blocking my path back to the main gallery, his smile showing too many teeth to be anything but threatening. "Little Isadora Volkov," he says in Russian, his accent thick and his breath reeking of vodka. "You think you're clever, spreading your legs for Italian dog, thinking it will save you from what's coming. But you're just delaying inevitable. Devochka, your father wants you dead. Bratva wants you dead. And Moretti cannot protect you forever. So why don't you save everyone trouble and tell us where you've hidden the money you stole? Tell us what you told FBI, and maybe we make your death quick instead of the slow, painful thing we have planned." The words should terrify me, should send me back to that place of helpless panic where I spent so many months. But instead I feel something else rising up inside me. Something sharp and angry and completely done with being threatened by men who think my fear is their birthright. "I didn't steal anything, Victor," I say, proud that my voice doesn't shake, that I can meet his eyes without flinching. "My father framed me, murdered Anton, and pinned it all on me to cover his own crimes, and you know it. You all know it. But you're too scared of him to admit the truth, too invested in the lie to acknowledge that you're all complicit in destroying an innocent woman's life for a man who faked his own death and abandoned you all. His hand shoots out faster than I expect, wrapping around my throat with bruising force, slamming me back against the wall, hard enough to make stars explode behind my eyes. His face inches from mine as spittle flies with his words. You don't speak his name with disrespect, you ungrateful Suki. He gave you everything, gave you life, and you repay him with betrayal, with lies, with spreading your legs for our enemy. So maybe I kill you right here, right now. Make it look like you choked on your champagne, and deny Moretti his little toy before he can use you against us. But Victor doesn't get to finish his threat. Doesn't get to tighten his grip or make good on his promise because suddenly Dante is there, moving with that liquid violence I've seen before. His hand gripping Victor's wrist and twisting it with such force I hear bones crack. The older man's scream of pain echoing through the hallway as he releases me and drops to his knees, cradling his shattered wrist against his chest. You made a mistake touching her, Dante says, his voice so cold it could freeze blood. And there's something in his eyes that looks less like human anger and more like the promise of death. You made a mistake breathing the same air as her, and you sure as hell made a mistake threatening her in my city, under my protection, at an event where I explicitly told the Bratva to stay away from her. So now you're going to crawl back to whoever's pulling your strings and deliver a message for me. He crouches down until he's eye level with Victor, one hand fisting in the older man's hair to force him to maintain eye contact, the other producing a knife from somewhere that gleams wicked and sharp in the hallway's soft lighting. Tell them that Isadora Volkov is mine, completely and irrevocably mine, and anyone who touches her, threatens her, or even looks at her wrong will answer to me personally. And I promise you, Victor, what I do to them will make your broken wrist feel like a pleasant massage, because I've spent years perfecting the art of making men beg for death. And I haven't had a good project in months, so please, per favor, give me a reason to demonstrate my skills. Security appears then, Dante's men in their discreet suits, and Victor is hauled away, with promises that he'll be escorted off the premises and banned from the museum, his threats and curses fading as they drag him toward the exit. And then it's just Dante and me in the hallway, his hands suddenly gentle as they frame my face, his thumbs brushing over my cheekbones while his eyes search mine for something I don't understand. Did he hurt you? He asks, his voice rough with something that sounds almost like fear. Tell me the truth, Bella. Did he hurt you? My throat aches where Victor grabbed me, and I know there will be bruises tomorrow, visible proof of the danger I'm in. But that's not what has me shaking. Not what has tears suddenly burning behind my eyes threatening to fall. You came for me, I whisper, the realization hitting me with the force of revelation. You were watching, waiting, protecting me even when I thought I was alone, and you came for me like it was the only thing that mattered. It was the only thing that mattered, he says, and his forehead drops to rest against mine, this moment of intimacy in a public hallway where anyone could see us, where the performance becomes something real and terrifying and impossible to take back. Don't you understand yet, Isadora? You're not just part of the plan. You're not just a weapon against your father. You're... But he doesn't finish. Doesn't tell me what I am. Just pulls back and straightens his jacket and offers me his arm again, like nothing happened. Like he didn't just shatter my understanding of what this arrangement means, like he didn't just show me that maybe, possibly, I'm not the only one falling into dangerous territory here. Later, in the car ride back to the penthouse, his hand finds mine in the darkness, his fingers threading through mine with the kind of natural ease that speaks of inevitability. And when I don't pull away, when I let myself hold on, like he's an anchor in a storm, I'm not sure I want to survive. I feel his thumb trace patterns against my palm that might be words in a language I don't speak, but somehow understand anyway. The city lights stream past the tinted windows, and I realize that somewhere between that rooftop and this moment, between wanting to die and choosing to live, between hating Dante Moretti for what he represents and falling for who he actually is beneath all the darkness and danger. I've crossed a line that I can never uncross, committed myself to a path that leads somewhere I can't see, but that I'm willing to walk anyway, because for the first time in my entire life, I feel like someone sees me not as a pawn, or a victim, or a problem to be solved, but as something worth protecting, worth saving, worth keeping, and that terrifying, beautiful truth is enough to make me squeeze his hand back and whisper into the darkness of the car, "Thank you for coming for me," knowing that he'll understand I'm not just talking about tonight, but about that rooftop, about every nightmare, about every moment he's chosen to be there when he could have walked away, and his response is just another squeeze of my hand and 2 words that change everything. Always Mia Regina, my queen. And I know with absolute certainty that whatever happens next, whatever wars we fight and battles we face, I'm no longer facing them alone, and that makes all the difference in the world. The warehouse on the edge of Red Hook smells like rust and betrayal, and the kind of inevitability that makes your stomach turn with dread. And as I stand beside Dante watching his men position themselves in the shadows with military precision, checking weapons and communication devices while the winter wind howls through broken windows like the screams of ghosts warning us to turn back, I can't shake the feeling that we're walking into something far worse than the carefully orchestrated trap Dante has planned to finally draw my father out of hiding and end this nightmare once and for all. 2 days have passed since the gala. 2 days of Dante barely sleeping as he coordinated with his network of informants and strategists. 2 days of me watching him transform from the man who holds me through nightmares into the cold, calculated killer that the world fears. And the shift is terrifying, not because of what it reveals about him, but because of how easily I've come to accept both sides of him as equally real, equally necessary, equally mine in ways I'm not ready to examine too closely. The plan is elegant in its simplicity and absolutely insane in its execution. Dante has spread word through channels he knows will reach the Bratva that I've agreed to testify against my father in exchange for immunity, that I've hidden evidence of his embezzlement and arms deals in a safety deposit box that I'm willing to trade for protection, and that tonight at midnight, I'll be at this warehouse with Dante to make the exchange with federal authorities, who are supposedly willing to meet in neutral territory. It's all lies, carefully constructed fiction designed to force my father's hand, to make him desperate enough to come himself instead of sending expendable soldiers, to finally put us in the same room where Dante can reveal the evidence he's been gathering for months about my father's betrayal, not just of me, but of the Bratva itself, about the money he's stolen, the deals he's made with rival organizations, the ways he's played both sides against each other for his own profit, while his so-called allies thought he was dead and mourned him like a brother. "You don't have to be here for this, Bella," Dante says for the 3rd time in the past hour, his hand finding the small of my back in that possessive gesture that's become as natural as breathing between us. His dark eyes studying my face like he's trying to memorize every detail in case something goes wrong, in case this is the last quiet moment we have before everything explodes into violence and chaos. You can wait in the car with Luca and Tommaso, you can watch from the surveillance van, you can be anywhere but here in the direct line of fire, because if something happens to you, if your father or his men get their hands on you before I can stop them. But he doesn't finish the sentence, doesn't articulate the fear I can see written across his features, the same fear that's been driving him to distraction since we finalized this plan. "I need to be here," I tell him, my voice steady despite the terror coursing through my veins like ice water, despite the way my hands shake when I think too hard about seeing my father again, about facing the man who destroyed everything I loved, and watching him finally answer for his crimes. I need to look him in the eyes and let him see that I survived, that I'm not the weak, broken thing he wanted me to be, that I found something stronger than his hate in your... But I stop myself before I finish that sentence, before I admit out loud what's been growing between us in stolen moments and midnight confessions, before I make this about us, when it needs to be about justice and revenge and ending the nightmare that's consumed both our lives. Dante's jaw clenches. that muscle jumping in his cheek that appears when he's fighting some internal battle, and then he's pulling me against him with almost bruising force. His arms wrapped around me like he can shield me from what's coming through sheer will alone, his mouth finding mine in a kiss that tastes like desperation and possession and promises neither of us might be able to keep. "When this is over," he says against my lips, his forehead resting against mine as we breathe the same air in this moment, suspended outside of time. "When your father is destroyed and the Bratva knows the truth and you're finally free of this nightmare, we're going to have a very long conversation about what you almost just said, about what I know you feel, about what I've been feeling since that night on the rooftop when I saw you ready to jump and realized that letting you die wasn't an option I could live with, capiche?" The sound of vehicles approaching cuts through whatever response I might have given. The rumble of engines and the crunch of gravel under tires announcing the arrival of our unwanted guests. And Dante's entire demeanor shifts in an instant. The tender man who just kissed me disappearing behind the mask of the Mafia boss who's orchestrated this entire deadly chess game. His hand moves to the weapon concealed beneath his jacket, his eyes scanning the warehouse entrance with predatory focus. And I watch as his men melt deeper into the shadows, becoming invisible threats waiting to spring the trap. And my heart is pounding so hard I can feel it in my throat, taste it on my tongue, hear it in my ears drowning out everything else. The warehouse doors crash open with dramatic violence, and they pour in like a flood of expensive suits and barely concealed weapons, at least a dozen men fanning out in formation that speaks of military training and paranoid preparation. But it's the man walking in the center of that formation who makes my blood run cold and hot simultaneously, who makes every muscle in my body tense with the primal urge to run or fight or scream. Alexei Volkov looks exactly as I remember him from before his supposed death. All silver hair and cold blue eyes, and that charismatic smile that used to make me feel safe and now makes me want to vomit. Dressed in a three-piece suit that probably cost more than most people make in a year. Walking with the confident swagger of a man who thinks he's already won, who thinks his daughter is still that scared, broken girl who couldn't fight back, who couldn't hurt him even if she wanted to because blood is supposed to be thicker than betrayal. "Isadora, Dorogaya, my darling daughter," he calls out in Russian, his voice carrying across the empty space between us with false warmth that makes my skin crawl. "You've been very difficult to find, running around with Italian trash, playing at being something you're not. But I'm here now to bring you home, to fix the mistakes you've made, to remind you that family is forever even when children forget their place." His eyes slide to Dante with undisguised contempt, that smile never wavering even as threat drips from every word. "Moretti, you've had your fun with my daughter, used her body to irritate me, I'm sure. But this business is family matter, not something for outsiders, so why don't you walk away now before this becomes problem for both our organizations, da?" But before Dante can respond with whatever cutting remark I know is forming behind his cold expression, before he can spring whatever trap he's set, or reveal whatever evidence he's gathered, the world tilts sideways in the worst possible way, because Marco, Dante's second-in-command, his trusted lieutenant, the man who's been by his side through countless battles and business deals, steps forward from behind my father's formation with a weapon pointed directly at us, his expression apologetic but resolute in a way that makes my stomach drop through the floor. "I'm sorry, Capo," Marco says, using the Italian term of respect, even as he commits the ultimate betrayal. "But Volkov pays better, and you were always too soft when it came to this girl, too distracted, too willing to risk everything for someone who's just going to get you killed. So I made choice that keeps me alive and wealthy. And I suggest you make same choice now by walking away and letting him have what's his." I feel Dante go absolutely still beside me, that dangerous stillness that precedes explosive violence. And I know without looking that he's calculating angles and odds and possibilities, that brilliant tactical mind working overtime to find a way out of this disaster. But we're outnumbered and outgunned and betrayed from the inside. And my father is laughing now. That cruel, familiar sound that defined so many childhood disappointments and adult nightmares. "You see, Dochka," This is what happens when you trust the wrong people, when you think you can run from family and find something better in the arms of criminals and killers. But there is no better. There is only survival. And you've forgotten how to survive without me, how to exist without my protection, my guidance, my love, even when that love requires harsh lessons. He's walking toward us now, confident that his numbers and Marco's betrayal have neutralized any threat Dante poses, and I can see Dante's men in the shadows waiting for some signal, some command. But Dante's hand finds mine in what might be goodbye or might be promise, his fingers squeezing once as his other hand remains steady on his weapon. Isadora, my father continues, close enough now that I can see the madness in his eyes, the absolute conviction that he's right and justified in everything he's done. Did you really think Moretti cared about you? That he saw you as anything more than useful tool against me? You were always naive, always too trusting, always believing fairy tales about love and loyalty when the world runs on fear and power. But I'll forgive you, Dorogaya, because that's what fathers do. We forgive our children their stupidity and their mistakes, even when those mistakes cost us time and money and reputation. The rage that surges through me at his words, at his condescending tone and his absolute certainty that I'm still that girl he could manipulate and control, burns away the last traces of fear that might have held me back. And I step forward before Dante can stop me, my voice ringing out clear and strong in the warehouse space. You were right about one thing, Father, I say in Russian so all his men can understand, so there's no confusion about my meaning. I was naive and trusting and stupid, but not about Dante, not about finding something better. I was naive about you, about thinking you were ever capable of love, about believing that the man who raised me was anything more than monster-wearing father's mask. And you're wrong about something else too. Dante does care. He cares enough to have spent months gathering evidence of your real crimes, your embezzlement from Bratva accounts, your deals with Cosa Nostra and triads behind your brother's backs, your plans to eliminate senior leadership and take control yourself, and every single one of your men is about to learn exactly what kind of snake they've been following. My father's expression shifts from condescending amusement to cold fury in an instant, his hand moving toward his own weapon. But everything happens so fast after that. Too fast to process in real time. Only later will I be able to piece together the sequence of events that turns the warehouse into a battlefield. Dante moves like lethal poetry, his weapon coming up and firing at Marco before the traitor can pull his trigger, the shot catching him in the shoulder and spinning him around. And suddenly, Dante's men are emerging from the shadows, with weapons raised, and someone's throwing flashbangs that explode in blinding light and deafening sound. And my father's reaching for me with one hand, while his other raises a gun. And I remember the weapon Dante insisted I carry tucked against my spine. Remember the hours he spent teaching me to shoot in his private range. Remember his words that survival sometimes means doing terrible things to terrible people. The gun is in my hand before conscious thought catches up. Muscle memory and instinct taking over, and I'm not aiming at my father even though every fiber of my being wants to. I'm aiming at the structural support beam directly above him, the one Dante's demolition expert weakened earlier today as insurance, and I pull the trigger twice, 3 times, the recoil jarring my arms but my aim staying true. And the beam groans and cracks and begins to collapse, bringing part of the warehouse ceiling down in a cascade of metal and concrete that creates chaos and confusion, and exactly the opening Dante needed. His arm wraps around my waist, pulling me backwards as debris falls where we were standing, his body covering mine as we hit the ground hard, his men returning fire at my father's soldiers, who are scattered and disoriented by the collapse. And through the dust and smoke and madness, I see my father's face one last time. See the shock and fury, and something that might be grudging respect before he's forced to retreat, dragged backward by his surviving men toward the exit, his voice screaming promises of revenge that are swallowed by the sounds of battle. When the warehouse finally goes quiet, except for the groans of wounded men and the settling of debris, when Dante's men secure the perimeter and confirm that my father's forces have retreated. When the adrenaline starts to fade and the reality of what just happened crashes over me like a wave, I find myself in Dante's arms again, his hands running over my body checking for injuries, his voice rough and shaken as he murmurs words I don't fully process. "You saved my life," he says finally, his palms framing my face, his eyes darker than I've ever seen them. Intense with emotion, he's not bothering to hide anymore. "You could have run, could have let him take you, could have chosen safety over me, but you stayed and fought and saved my life, Mia Regina, and I'm not losing you, not to him, not to them, not to anything in this world or the next. Do you understand me?" And when his mouth crashes down on mine, desperate and possessive and claiming in a way that goes beyond performance or strategy or careful planning, when I kiss him back with equal desperation and certainty, tasting blood and dust and promise on his lips, I know that whatever happens next, whatever final confrontation awaits with my father and the Bratva, we'll face it together. And that makes all the difference because I'm not alone anymore. Not broken anymore. Not the girl who wanted to die on that rooftop. I'm something new and dangerous and alive in ways I never knew were possible. And my father is about to learn exactly what he created when he tried to destroy me. The Castellano Hotel rooftop looks different in the pale light of dawn. Less like the stage for my attempted suicide, and more like the arena where everything that was broken inside me will finally be made whole again. And as I stand here 6 weeks after the warehouse disaster, with Dante's hand warm and steady in mine, watching his men position themselves around the perimeter, while we wait for my father to walk into the final trap that will end this nightmare once and for all, I realize that the girl who stood on this ledge wanting to die has been replaced by a woman who understands that sometimes you have to burn down your entire world to build something better from the ashes. The plan is elegant in its poetic justice. Dante leaked information through channels he knew would reach my father that I am here, alone and vulnerable, ready to end things the way I originally intended before Dante interrupted that night. And my father's ego and his absolute conviction that I'm still weak enough to manipulate has brought him back to the place where this all began. Except this time I'm not the victim in this story. I'm the architect of his destruction. And the knowledge sits in my chest like molten steel, hot and unbreakable and absolutely certain. "He's here," Dante murmurs against my ear, his arm wrapped around my waist in a gesture that's become as essential as breathing over the past weeks, as necessary as the way he holds me through nightmares and kisses me like I'm the only thing keeping him grounded to earth. 3 cars, a dozen men, and your father walking in like he's already won, like he can't see the trap closing around him, like he doesn't understand that this rooftop is where his empire ends and your freedom begins, Mia Regina. His lips brush my temple, a gesture so tender it nearly breaks through the armor I've built for this confrontation, and I lean back into his solid strength, drawing courage from the man who saw me at my absolute lowest and decided I was worth saving, worth protecting, worth loving even when I couldn't love myself. My father emerges from the rooftop access door like a king entering his throne room, all confidence and cold calculation, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the early hour, his suit immaculate as always. And for a moment I'm transported back to childhood, to birthday parties and bedtime stories, to the man I thought he was before I learned that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like fathers who smile while they destroy you. "Isadora," he says, spreading his arms like he expects me to run to him for an embrace. Like the past months of hell he put me through can be erased with paternal affection and practiced charm. My wayward daughter returns to the scene of her almost tragedy, still clinging to the Italian dog who thinks he can protect you from destiny, from blood, from the simple truth that you belong to me, that you've always belonged to me, and that no amount of running or hiding or spreading your legs for criminals will change that fundamental reality. "You're right about one thing," I say, stepping away from Dante even though every instinct screams to stay within the safety of his presence, walking toward my father with deliberate steps that echo against the concrete rooftop. "I did belong to you once, when I was a child who didn't know better. when I believed that fathers were supposed to protect their daughters instead of framing them for murder and embezzlement, when I thought family meant something sacred instead of just another weapon to be used and discarded when convenient. But I don't belong to you anymore, Papa. Because belonging requires consent, and I revoke yours. I take back every piece of myself that you tried to destroy. And I'm here to tell you that you failed to kill me, you failed to break me, and you're about to fail at everything else too. The rage that crosses his face is almost gratifying. That mask of paternal concern cracking to reveal the monster underneath, and his hand moves toward the weapon I know he carries. But Dante's men are already moving, emerging from their positions with weapons drawn, and suddenly my father's dozen soldiers realize they're surrounded by 3 times that number, outmaneuvered by a man who's been playing chess while they were playing checkers. Did you really think I would come here unprepared? My father snarls, his eyes darting around the rooftop, calculating odds that are no longer in his favor. Did you think I wouldn't have contingencies, backup plans, people who owe me favors and fear my revenge more than they fear Moretti's displeasure? Actually, Dante says, moving to stand beside me again, his presence solid and reassuring as his voice carries across the rooftop with absolute authority. We were counting on your contingencies, on your backup plans, on your absolute certainty that you're smarter than everyone else, because while you were planning how to kill your daughter and eliminate me as a threat, I was having very interesting conversations with your Bratva brothers, the ones you thought were dead or neutralized, the ones who've been very curious about the offshore accounts you've been hiding, the deals you've made with their enemies, the leadership positions you were planning to eliminate so you could seize control, and they asked me to give you a message. Alexei, they revoke your membership, your protection, your right to call yourself Bratva, and they sentence you to exile and disgrace, which in your world is a fate worse than death. I watch my father's face cycle through disbelief, to fury, to something that might be fear. Watch him realize that the empire he built on lies and betrayal has finally collapsed under the weight of his own corruption. And Dante produces a tablet from his jacket, pulling up documents and bank records and recorded conversations that paint a portrait of treachery so complete that even my father's own men are looking at him with disgust and betrayal. You sold us out, one of them says in Russian, his weapon now pointed at my father instead of at us. You stole from Brotherhood, made deals with enemies, planned to kill Pakan himself, all while we mourned you like brother, like friend, and this whole time you were laughing at our stupidity. Wait, my father says, that practiced charm returning as he tries to talk his way out of certain destruction, tries to spin lies and excuses. But I step forward again, pulling out the small recording device Dante gave me weeks ago, the one that's been running this entire time, capturing every word of his confession, every admission of guilt, every threat against me that proves beyond doubt that I was innocent all along, that he framed me, that Anton's death was his doing, not mine. The FBI has copies of everything, I tell him, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. The evidence, the recordings, the witness statements from people you thought were too scared to talk, and they're waiting at the bottom of this building to take you into custody, to charge you with murder and conspiracy, and about 20 other crimes that will keep you in prison for the rest of your miserable life. But before they take you, before you disappear into the system you always thought you were above, I want you to know something, Papa. You asked that night if anyone cared whether I lived or died, and the answer is yes, he did. This man you called trash and dog and criminal cared enough to save me, to rebuild me, to love me in ways you never could, and that's why you lost. Because you never understood that real power doesn't come from fear and control. It comes from the people who choose to stand beside you when they could walk away. My father lunges toward me then, that final desperate attempt to hurt me one last time, to leave me with scars that will never heal. But Dante's already moving, intercepting him with brutal efficiency, his fist connecting with my father's jaw in a perfectly executed punch that drops the older man to his knees. And there's something deeply satisfying about watching my father on the ground, broken and defeated, while I stand above him whole and strong and free for the first time in my life. You were right about one thing, I tell him as Dante's men move to secure him, as the sounds of police sirens wail from the streets below, as the sunrise paints the sky in shades of pink and gold that promise new beginnings. I was naive and trusting, and too soft for your world. But I found a different world. One where those qualities aren't weaknesses but strengths. Where the man I love sees them as reasons to cherish me instead of destroy me. And I choose that world over yours. I choose life over death. I choose love over hate. And I choose to walk away from you knowing that you'll spend the rest of your days in a cage while I'm finally free. The police take him away in handcuffs, his protests and threats fading as they drag him toward the rooftop access door. And I watch him disappear from my life with a sense of closure that feels like releasing a breath I've been holding for months, like setting down weight I didn't realize was crushing me until it was gone. And then it's just Dante and me on this rooftop where everything began, and everything ends, and everything transforms into something new. So, he says, pulling me into his arms, with the kind of tender possessiveness that makes my heart race and my breath catch. We've destroyed your father, cleared your name, ended the threat hanging over both our heads, which means it's time for that conversation I promised you, the one about what happens now, about what this is between us, about whether you're ready to be my queen, not just in name but in reality, not just for strategy but for always, because I love you, Isadora Volkov. I love you with a completeness that terrifies me. And I need to know if you feel the same or if this has all been just survival and convenience and gratitude dressed up as something more. The question hangs between us like a held breath, like the moment before jumping, except this time I'm not jumping toward death, but toward life, toward possibility, toward the terrifying and beautiful reality of choosing love in a world that's tried so hard to teach me that love is just another word for weakness. That night, I say, my hands framing his face, memorizing the sharp angles and dark eyes and the scar above his eyebrow that I've traced with my fingers in countless stolen moments. When you asked me if I cared, if it mattered, you said you cared about wasted potential. But what you really meant was that you saw something in me worth saving, worth fighting for, worth keeping, and you've spent every day since then proving that with actions and words, and the kind of love I didn't know existed outside of fairy tales. So yes, Dante Moretti, I love you. I love you with the kind of certainty that comes from being broken and rebuilt in the shape of something stronger. And I choose you. I choose us. I choose this life we're going to build together from the ashes of everything that tried to destroy us. His kiss tastes like promise and possession, and the future written in languages we're still learning to speak. And as the sun rises fully over Manhattan, painting the city in gold and transforming this rooftop from a place of despair into a place of triumph, I realize that the woman who wanted to die here has been replaced by a woman who's learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose to live, to fight, to love even when the world tells you it's safer to give up. And standing here in Dante's arms with my father's empire in ruins and my innocence proven and my future stretching out before me like an unwritten book, I understand that this is what redemption feels like. This is what it means to rise from ashes stronger and fiercer and more alive than you've ever been. And when Dante whispers against my lips, "Let's burn it all down together, Mia Regina. Let's build an empire from the ruins and rule it side by side," my answer is simply to kiss him again. To let that kiss be my promise and my answer and my vow that wherever he goes, whatever battles he fights, whatever darkness he faces, I'll be there beside him, his queen, his equal, his love. And together we'll prove that sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction but survival, isn't hate but love, isn't dying on a rooftop but living fully and fiercely and unapologetically in defiance of everyone who ever tried to tell us we couldn't, we shouldn't, we wouldn't. Because we did. And that makes all the difference in the world.